Next item on the agenda is a violation appeal, and this is for landing to the front of the house. Josh, are you going to take that since Ken is not here?
Yes, Ken is not here. He is ill, so I will be handling his stuff tonight. This is an appeal by Mr. Matthew Egan of 305 4th Street Northeast. The general details are in your packet, but in summary, he constructed a landing and stairs on the front of his house to replace one that was existing. He had heard from city staff that in order to do so, due to storm damage, he'd have to build an exact same footprint as was there, and then ultimately submitting a building permit for what seemed to be a larger landing than he'd had before. Ultimately, he was told that he would need to get a variance to have that larger one because it is in the setback. And then ultimately, in October, city staff driving by did notice that a landing had been constructed, and those are the photos that are in your packet there. And then 2 days later, city staff did send Mr. Egan a letter stating that he would either need to build the minimum according to building code or get a variance for that. And then ultimately, he did end up requesting an appeal before you all this evening, and so that is where we are at presently. I believe Mr. Egan, I have not met him, said he would be here this evening, so I'm sure he will stand for any questions, or maybe he wants to fill in some of that story as well.
Sure. Yep. I do have a prepared statement. Pardon me, I'm a little nervous. I don't do a lot of public speaking. So my name is Matthew Egan. I live at 305 4th Street Northeast. Tomorrow actually marks the 20th year I've been a resident of New Prague. I started my family here. My wife and I are raising our 4 children here. We've also started a small business here. I've always been proud to call New Prague my home. My wife and I moved into our home in 2004, where we still live today. Over the last 20 years, we've continuously tried to improve our home. This is my first interaction with the city where the situation seems adversarial. You have the memo from Mr. Ondich citing the timeline of events, communications between myself and Ms. Chapman, and photos of my property. So do I. I have a few corrections to the timeline of events for you. This all started in November of 2023 when I hired a contractor to replace the windows, siding, soffit, fascia, and gutters on my home. The contractor acquired all the necessary permits, and the project was completed near the end of December. As part of this project, the front landing and stairs were removed from the home on December 11th, 2023. I have pictures because I'm the one that removed the front landing and stairs. At the time, we had every intention of rebuilding this landing the following spring and trying to improve on what was already there. I had the contractor install a new ledger board for the landing at this time, and had I known then that the city planners would make this so difficult, I may have done things differently, but hindsight's 20/20. The ledger board was installed, flashed, and sided around. This is the plan we were going forward with. It wasn't until I inquired about a permit on April 11th of 2024 that I learned the city may want me to request a variance. I initially spoke in email with Deb Wagner. Ms. Wagner got my questions to Ms. Chapman for ultimate clarification. On May 2nd, I applied for a building permit and was notified on May 6th that the permit application was denied. The reason given was that it appeared, based on a Google Street View image from 2013, that what I was proposing to build was larger than what was shown on the Street View image from Google. Does anyone at the city know what the original dimension of the landing and stairs was? Did the previous homeowner have to apply for a variance to build the old landing and stairs? I know the old landing and stairs were built in 2004. I know this because my wife and I happened to meet the building inspector the day we did our final walkthrough when we closed on our home. He was doing his final inspection. In 2008, when I applied for a permit to install egress windows on the front and back of my home, I was not required to apply for a variance. The window wells that were dug are well within the 30-foot setback. The front of my home is only 28 feet from the curb. After being denied a permit, I began to find a surveyor. I wanted to play nice and follow the rules. I got a personal recommendation for a surveyor in our area, and I got it directly from a member of the New Prague Planning Commission. I contacted the surveyor and was informed that the cost to survey my property would be upwards of $4,000 or more. This is nearly 3 times the cost of materials it took to build this. And the reason I have not applied for a variance. I feel that asking any resident to absorb this kind of expense for a project so small is unreasonable. The difference in dimensions from the old landing to this new one that exists now is a mere 24 inches. 24 inches, that is all. The old landing was 4 feet deep by 6 feet wide. The new landing is 4 feet deep by 8 feet wide. The new stairs and landing are not any closer to the road than the old ones were. But because this falls within your 30-foot setback, the city deems it non-conforming. I don't know if you've noticed the homes in my neighborhood, but none of them conform. They're all different. We live in an older part of town. This isn't a Keyland Homes development. The front door of every home on my block falls within your setback. I have no problem paying for a building permit, having an inspection, complying with the safe way of building things. But I do have a problem with city government making this process prohibitively expensive. The difference of 24 inches should not cost thousands of dollars. I ask the city to reconsider its denial of my building permit or find me a surveyor that will survey my lot for under $1,500 so that I can afford to apply for a variance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, the city would have required a survey, this question to Josh, would have required a survey in order to consider a variance?
Yes, so I believe speaking with staff, generally surveys are required, so that way we get an exact lay of the land, especially when a variance is being talked about in question, because a variance generally is going against what the code allows. And so to make sure that we're getting exact dimensions and someone can't come back later and say, well, they ended up not meeting it because here's where things are actually at. The survey just kind of helps make sure that everything is exactly where people say it's going to be and things are built accordingly.
Okay. And a survey can be done, let's say, prior to the purchase of a piece of property, just to ensure that everyone understands where the lot lines are?
I believe so.
Sort of thing, okay.
Well, I'm the council rep on the planning commission. I don't recall this particular one. It might have been or this issue coming up, but
So it sounds like this particular issue did not come before the planning commission.
It did not.
It would have if a variance had been applied for.
Well, I agree with the homeowner. I mean, $4,000 to do some type of survey seems, it's just prohibited to, why somebody would want to actually do that. It just seems to me like a variance. I can't recall requiring surveys for any other variance that we do on fence sizes or, you know, closer to one person's property or setbacks or anything else. Like, you know, we've had swimming pool issues and things like that come before the planning commission, where things infringe on the setback violation. But I mean, clearly this is an upgrade to the house. It looks a lot nicer. I just don't understand why in this situation, you should have got the variance. Or
Understood.
at least brought it to the planning commission, because I'm sure it would have just been rubber stamped, and it would be this, we wouldn't be here tonight.
Right.
No, I mean, I guess we can't say that because we have not, I would be careful about what you say since no variance has formally been presented.
Okay, I'll just say that if it came in front of me on the planning commission, I can't speak for the other members. I certainly wouldn't require a $4,000 survey for an additional 2 feet that's gonna upgrade the house. And to be very honest, and maybe I am wrong, but I don't recall any time we've had any type of setback issues where we've issued variances, and we're pretty lenient with it if it's not deemed some type of safety issue or it's in some way degrading the property. But this is obviously an upgrade. Personally, I would have voted for it. I don't know what the rest of the planning commission would have. And I would have brought up the same thing as I'm bringing up now, that it just seems ridiculous that somebody would have to pay $4,000 for an extra 2 feet.
In the timeline of events, on the third bullet point from the bottom, it says that Planner Chapman sent a letter to Mr. Egan stating that the landing must be built to meet the minimum building code, or a variance or survey would be needed. But, so it seems as if,
I believe that was supposed to say and survey,
okay,
but yes, I did not write that. It's just my understanding, speaking with staff, that it was a survey was requested as part of the application process with the variance.
And my curiosity I have to ask, why require a survey for something so small? I would have no problem applying for the variance, but the cost to do a survey of the property is prohibitive. It's just ridiculously expensive when we're talking a difference of 24 inches. And it's clearly an upgrade to the home.
I agree with you. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't have anybody from the planning office that can perhaps answer those questions a little bit more in detail. I mean, would the planning commission have the ability to say, no, we're not gonna require a survey on this, we're just gonna allow it?
I would certainly have to check with City Attorney Scott Riggs. I do know a variance would be required since it is going
Yes.
against code. That would be a required part.
I agree with that.
I would
Yeah.
have to check and see if getting around certain applications requirements are allowed. And I guess I just say that going either way, once you start getting away from application requirements, you're gonna get people that may push that line a little bit.
Oh, I totally agree, but and there was, Mr. Egan, you should have applied for and you could have come to the planning commission and spoke in front of us like you did tonight.
Yeah.
And like I said, I know how I would have voted. You didn't quite follow that timeline, and yes, and I agree, there are rules that way because there's standards that the city upholds that we require our residents to do.
I understand, and what I was told at the outset is to apply for the variance, I must have a survey.
Okay,
That was not even a question. It was to apply for a variance, you must provide us with a survey and apply for the variance with a $385 fee. I have no problem applying for the variance. It's the $4,000 or more that it would take
Right.
to survey my property.
right, I get it, and without some members of the planning, office here, I'd like to ask them, what do you guys feel if we just table it for the next meeting?
Yeah, I was gonna
Until
make that.
until maybe Ken's feeling better and he can be here, and if you wanna check with Scott Riggs real quick.
We can certainly do more background, and I'm hopeful that Ken will be back by the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
And
just-
remember, it does look a lot better, and is it basically in the same footprint?
It's
It's only
bigger.
24 inches wider, sir. That's it.
Could I get clarification on that map, because I'm a little confused?
Yes, sir.
So you're saying the picture that, the Google picture does not represent what the previous deck was?
So I have the same image as you have. The very first image of the original landing from 2013.
Yes,
That is the original landing and stairs.
okay,
That was built in 2004.
okay.
And that is 6 feet wide by 4 feet deep.
The 2013 one?
2013, yes.
It's 6 feet wide?
It is 6 feet wide, yes, sir.
Oh, it doesn't look like 6
No,
feet.
it
I know, it looks very, from the
door.
Google image, it looks very, very misleading.
Is the door 36
36
inches?
inches.
The door is
yeah.
36 inches, yes.
And then another 3 feet somewhere in there?
Well, a
Yes.
foot and a half on either side.
Well,
right?
keep in mind the lens that they use on Google Street View, it's a
Okay.
fisheye type of lens, so it
Okay.
really distorts the image.
Okay. Okay, so that is a good representation of what you're saying it was before you took it
Correct.
off.
Correct, yes.
And then the other thing I was confused about is when the contractor did the work that you mentioned, the gutter and et cetera, did the permit that was given at that time include this landing?
It did not extend to that landing, no, sir.
So what were you thinking then?
I had planned to apply for a permit in the spring and rebuild it after the snow was gone.
So it wasn't demolished because of weather or something like that?
No, it was removed because it was in very poor condition.
Okay,
A lot of the wood was starting to deteriorate,
okay,
and we had intended to rebuild it come the spring.
okay,
And part of the removing it was so that they could properly flash around the front door and side around that ledger board to make sure everything was watertight.
okay. The new one does look nice, so I
Thank you.
appreciate that. I have to say though, I don't have setback requirements. It's not your setback requirements, it's our setback requirements. We're all part of the same community that's approved this ordinance. So when you say your setbacks, I'm not sure who you're referring to as yours.
Just the city in general. So,
Right,
yes.
it's our setback
Right.
requirements.
Um,
And quite often, the issue isn't with anybody in city, it's normally the neighborhood that brings these things to our attention, not,
I'd like to ask, when was this changed? When was the setback requirements implemented where you would have to require or request a variance to do something within this 30-foot setback? 'Cause
Boy,
as I
that-
said,
that's been around forever.
So we'd certainly have to dig into when exactly this particular property was zoned, what it is zoned.
Right.
I'm guessing it's been decades, would be my guess that
Sure.
particular requirement's been in place.
Yeah.
it
I've
was, and as I was curious in 2008, when I did egress windows, it falls within that setback. I was never required to have a variance at that time.
And, yeah, and I'm not sure, I know generally there's always, similar to this one being if you meet building code exactly, you can build into it without a variance.
Sure.
There's certainly exceptions to where maybe egress, since it's a safety feature, you are allowed in. That I can't say.
Right.
Again, that'd be a Ken question, who would know better than I would.
Understood?
I'd agree with the table.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we just table it until we can have at least somebody from the planning department, whether it's Ms. Chapman or Mr. Ondich, available to answer some of these questions.
Do I have a second on the motion to table the matter? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
We'll get some answers.
Thank you, I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I'll work with Mr. Egan to make sure that when we bring it back next is a date that works for you too.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay,